Oh, wonderful. Well, hello and welcome everybody to our T360 Swanepoel Trends Report live event that we're doing today. My name is Jack Miller. I'm the Chief Executive and President of T360, and I have here with me Paul Hagee, who is the Editor-in-Chief of the Swanepoel Trends Report and drove a lot of the research and writing that went into this report. So we're glad everybody is here today. We've got a very action-packed session. We're going to cover a lot of material very quickly, and we're going to bring in many of our T360 team members to come and address their particular areas of expertise in the trends report. So again, people are streaming in. I'm seeing them, everybody join, and we're going to run this. This will be about an hour. How long are we going to run for, Paul? What's our total run time here?
We're targeting 90 minutes, so it's going to be an action-packed 90 minutes. And
Yeah.
you can see, as you mentioned, the Trends Report is quite dense and it's kind of hard to approach. And we wanted to provide kind of a comprehensive presentation for leaders to really understand how they can utilize the report, and then bring in some of our consultants who are able to speak to specific audiences, because as we know, the industry is quite diverse. So we have the brokerage team talking to brokerage leaders. What are some of the key takeaways for them in the report, and how can they use it to grow and adapt to the trends happening? Same thing with organized real estate and technology. And we can see the times. It's going to be fast paced. I think we're going to touch probably all the chapters, at least 9 of the 10. And this will be a good digest for people. And hopefully they'll be able to use the report, which is the whole point of it. It's a strategic tool.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that challenge to us, Paul. You said, how can we help our readers actually use the report, and that you really drove the putting all this all together. So great job, and I think I'm ready to dive in and start talking to our leaders about the different chapters. Are you?
Okay, well, let's go to let's do overview the report first, and
Okay.
just show the chapters, and let's go to the next slide, and then just to introduce the report and what it is, and like for the people that may not have it top of mind. So if we go to the next slide, this the report has 10 chapters this year, or 10 trends that we cover, and it covers quite a wide gamut of topics, and also from different angles. Some of these are company profiles, like Home Services of America and Open Door, which is two interesting ones right now. And some of these are practices around hiring and how to evaluate your technology, which we will definitely go into on the call. But the report has a goal of, it's an 18 to 24 month horizon. So it's a higher strategy perspective, and that's the whole design. So when you think about it, you're thinking big, we're thinking broad, and like how do you make big decisions about your company from all these different topics. So that's the gist of the report. And we talked briefly, Jack, like how would you recommend leaders use the report, because it's hard to maybe grapple with when you first get it. And we talked about, and maybe you can outline like, hey, what's the way the leadership team would use this?
Yeah, so we've talked to we have a lot of people that get this report every year, and we actually interviewed some of them and say, how do you use the report? What are the ways that you make use of it in your organization to get the most utility out of a deep dive into strategy or particular areas in the business? And this is generally where we saw people would go. They said, well, first of all, make sure everybody has it. So we have a lot of companies that get a bulk order from us, and just make sure their leadership has access to it and gets it. And then we found this was a common practice, is that they would incorporate it into their meetings, their strategy, their planning meetings, and they'd have different people assigned to read chapters and then come and present to the group and talk to the group about, here's what I think this means to our business or our association or our organization, whatever flavor of entity that you are in the residential real estate industry. So that was that was another common approach. And then lastly, some people would say, well, we read the report, we wanted to go deeper on it, and we feel like there's some value in it. So they'd reach out to one of the people that will be on our call today to talk to them about how that particular topic applies into their business. Which, by the way, I will tell you, you could apply the same practice to the last probably 4 or 5 years of trends reports, where if you
Yes.
have those, there's certain chapters that we wrote that, like, hey, this is going to be important for 3 or 4 for many years going forward. So any of these are
Yeah,
ones where, like, if you read about it in the report, there's often, even more if you come talk to our team.
great. Speaking of, I think
Speaking
first up we have the brokerage team. We welcome in Dean Cottrell and Lisa Picardo, who both lead the brokerage consulting for us at T360. And guys, welcome. Let's see, waiting for Dean and Lisa to
I'm
join.
here.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, we're
How are
here.
you?
Hi
Nice to
there.
talk to you. So, as we discussed, we're going to run through some of these chapters and some of the key takeaways, and talk about some of the meat of some of these chapters. And excited to talk with you today about some of the chapters we've identified. So let's dive right in. The first one we identified to talk about was our profile of Home Services of America, which, as all of us in the industry know, they're a little bit of a black box. And it was really interesting to talk with their leadership, interview their leadership, go into some demos with them and see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And what was the takeaway, the big takeaway for you guys when you read the report and thought about the takeaway and the chapter itself?
Well, I think it's interesting. They had, I think it was a 6.1%. So this is the largest return on revenue in the public reporting companies, right? So
Yes.
These are the largest public companies, but this was also by absolute dollars, not percent of return on revenue. So of course this doesn't include KWX, but very profitable. So that was one of the biggest takeaways.
Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
I was going to say, Paul, as we go through these slides, we'll get into more details. And then the takeaway, what's nice about the trends report is each chapter gives takeaways. So we'll actually, through the analysis of the chapter and the information, the readers will see actually the takeaways. To Lisa's point, what's really nice is you think about these organizations that either you compete with or in your market, maybe they might be in your market in the near future. You guys Paul, you and the research team doing a deep dive and being able to share these numbers and these percentages and getting a sense of how they're performing, frankly, creates a benchmark. It allows you to say, okay, how do I get to be a 6.2% return on my revenue as a return on revenue? So I can have that as a target,
And also,
or higher.
To your point, it's like identifying who is actually profitable right now. We know it's a really challenging time, and so what are some of the practices that they have, that they employ to achieve profitability, and what can we learn about? To that point, they're well known. They're like a bastion of the traditional real estate model, and
yeah, and
they've tried other models. Go ahead.
I was going to say that they tried other models, right? And then they realized that that the traditional brokerage model seems to adapt the best to the boom and bust cycles and is most resilient and flexible. So
that was really interesting to see, because they actually talked to that, how they had done experiments on different models, and they came back to that point Lisa just made, and it's made right there in that page. That traditional model was the most profitable, felt it would weather the storm best in up and down markets.
Yep, they could adapt and not be saddled with salaries, which is really a challenging element there. So they've been acquisitive. They're one of these companies that have really grown through acquisitions. And what does that tell you, Dean?
Yeah. Well, Lisa and I, this is one, it's great. We put the Warren Buffett, there's actually a great timeline. What you'll find in the trends report, not only in this chapter about profitability, but you'll see all the other chapters. Many of them will have timelines of how organizations or how things have changed and how people have made strategic decisions over the course of the last number of years. And it's really powerful to see the trends. And one thing that was really interesting in the trends report in this chapter, there was a quote by Warren Buffett that you can see right there on the slide. Yeah, and he talks specifically about how they were positioned. And this is not, they're not talking about Berkshire Hathaway. They're talking about Home Service America had positioned their organization such, when we had the Great Recession in housing, 2008, 2010 timeframe, these guys weren't playing defense. They were on offense. They were out doing acquisitions, which had a lot to do with the growth that they've received.
That's a great That's a great point, Dean. And something that maybe is lost on some in the industry is they have Berkshire Hathaway behind them, which is the sixth most like valuable company in the U.S. And if they see an opportunity, so in a downturn, they're a company with a lot of capital at their back that can invest. Just to this quote that Warren has here, it's like, hey, when the downturn, that's when the opportunities arise, you know. And they've really, as the chapter points out, like one of their standout places has been ancillary, and they operate these at scale, in mortgage in particular, right, Lisa?
Yeah, so their baseline is to capture 1 in 4 of their buyer clients, which is substantial. And interesting, they have very few of their operations that go below 20%, but they have a target goal of 30%. So this is a big part of their profitability as well. And then they really focus on service, like training the agents and customer service and accountability in the ancillary business.
And accountability kind of permeates the whole company. So this slide it illustrates. Gino Buffari took over in 2019, and you could speak to that, Lisa, like the rigor that they apply to their management.
Yeah, they really commit to that WIG, you know, that wildly important goal. Everything is focused on that, right? And so it's follow through. They have to show up every day, focus on that goal, high value actions. One of the things I found fascinating was accountability. So they all have accountability partners, all of their leaders, and they change every month, and they have to meet daily with the accountability partner. And then they benchmark them against their peers as well.
It's a great team building exercise as well, as we can all imagine. I really like that aspect of it. It's really fascinating, and the connecting questions that Gino helps coach the team with, which is really great. Okay, so the big takeaways here, Lisa, for this chapter, you know, we have 5,000 or 6,000 words here. What are some of the big takeaways?
Really to hold your leadership accountable to their goals, right? Really strong accountability, and ancillary services. Adding ancillary services is going to be the key to profitability for all brokerages, for sure.
Yeah, and I think they made the point, and we have it in the chapter as well, is it's hard to operate ancillary, especially mortgage and title, at a national scale because of the nuance in individual markets. And they really found that over 2 decades of operating and owning these businesses, they've been able to refine their processes in each market. And that's a big deal because a lot of companies are talking about ancillary. Just some of it's just being aware of how challenging it is. So when you take this on, it's profitable, but it's definitely a challenge. Okay.
But one thing to say here, Paul, one thing to throw out to everybody is that even though it's challenging, because it's running another business, but with that, it is a road that you should go down. Brokerages should go down and continue to try to improve on.
As we've written in the past in the Trends Report, Dean, you and I worked on that chapter. And so next up we have 7 compelling real estate companies. We profiled a variety of companies. We felt like these were interesting, maybe undercovered, or doing interesting things, and we try to do comprehensive snapshots. We pulled out 2 that we think are really interesting, and we'll run through these relatively quickly. Again, you can get the report and follow up with us if you have specific questions. But Peerage Realty Partners is one that stood out. They entered the U.S. in 2019. And Dee, do you want to talk a little bit about their trajectory since kind of like jumping into the market?
Lisa will take this one. I'll do
I'll talk about this one. I mean, they're growing like crazy, right? I mean, they have multiple brands. They've leaned heavily into Sotheby's International Realty. I think 7 or 8 companies now that they've acquired. I think the last press release I read of them, they expect to be over 50 billion in sales and 7,000 agents this year. So that's substantial. They have a really interesting philosophy in that they talented leaders and established companies. And so they serve as like a capital and strategic partner to facilitate growth and expansion, but they let the partner companies really operate independently and using, their entrepreneurial independence. So
it's interesting. And this year, it looks like they're going to be a top 10 brokerage. That's within 3 years. That's just showing what's happening now in the real estate market within 3 years of being in the U.S. Okay, at World Properties, Dean. What did you find interesting about these guys?
at properties. But one thing on Peerage too, going back to the timelines I mentioned before, it's really powerful to see because they were in Canada. They're based out of Canada, and they had a nice footprint in Canada. And then they came to the States. And like you just said, in 3 years, they've just launched at properties too. Both of these guys, think of the venture capital, private equity kind of backing organizations come in and with cash, this cash rich environment that some of these operations have, at properties being one. They started going to acquisition with Nest and then Ansley and then Christie's was the big purchase really that they've been launching, spending a lot of energy from my perspective with Christie's. It was a licensing platform, licensing agreement kind of space, and have moved to franchising Christie's and gone in that direction and pivoted to really grow franchises within the Christie's. So they're another one to keep an eye on. They're growing fast as well. They have a real good stable of companies. You can see them right there. And what they're doing, they're franchising out at properties or franchising out Christie's. So, they're coming like a mini Berkshire Hathaway, mini Anywhere kind of thing. Same with Peerage in a way.
Yeah, and to your point, they took on private equity money in 2018, and then that's when all these acquisitions happened. And they're moving fast, they're going big. It's like go big or go home. So that's some of the takeaways here from this chapter, I think. Would you say, guys?
Yeah, most definitely.
So it's just refining.
It's
scale matters, right? Yeah, scale matters. It's refine those competitive strengths, enhance management, and scale and more and get capital.
One thing too, we want to make sure, because everyone's not going to be in the top 10. There's 90,000 give or take brokerages just in the US alone. And everyone's not in the top 10 or the top 1,000, right? I think our mega 1,000 goes down to about 450 million as the 1,000th, and then it goes up from there. So there's a lot of brokerages that operate underneath that. So to this whole point, you need to really refine, watch your business, continue to refine it, improve it, work on it. Think of a ladder with rungs on it. You want to improve, move up a rung or two as you continue to work in key areas of your business. And then, as you said, scale matters. You might find some of these organizations out there are looking to buy. They are looking to buy. They've got a nice checkbook too, so you could position yourself potentially for an exit.
To your point, Dean, and I think we've talked about this a lot. You can succeed small, but you just have to focus and outcompete in very focused areas. And there's plenty of room, but that's part of the flip side of the trend. There's a way to apply this to every type of company out there. Okay, so next up we have our top trend. This was kind of the big doozy here, and you guys, one thing that's striking is I don't think brokers really understand the magnitude of this happening right now and the timing here. What were some of the takeaways you had from reading this and digesting it and seeing it in one condensed place, as we have it in the chapter of what's happening?
Yeah, this is one thing that this chapter is, and we have a great visual in here about a big old iceberg, but it really highlights what's going on. I mean, we're so focused as brokers, when I say we, in this space, on the kind of day-to-day, hand-to-hand combat of running your brokerage, running your team, running your business, and maybe losing sight of the horizon, what is coming over that horizon. And this chapter does a phenomenal job of giving some insight into what is coming this way, and what are some things that you can prepare for that. So it highlights the current court cases that are currently in place. One of the 4 is now a class action. So it talks about that, gets in depth on those lawsuits. It gives some perspective of where they've come, what they're about. There is quite a bit of not uniquenesses. There's a lot of similarities in these, and they're coming after the commission is what they're coming after. And ultimately how agents are paid.
One of the most striking things for this chapter, and especially in researching and putting it together, is that the timing of all this. And you can see the timing up here. This is why this matters. This is not something that, and there's a lot of things we talk about that go away and that are kind of blips and overhyped. This is happening right now, and the consent decree between NAR and the DOJ expired in 2018. March 2019, the first class action suit shows up. That is not an accident. And then you have a slow cadence of additional things happening. And currently NAR has a subpoena from the DOJ about the brokerage commission. So the DOJ, the federal regulators, and the lawsuits are looking at exactly the same thing, the compensation structure of the industry, in which sellers, listing brokers share the commission with buyer brokers, and that's the way the funnel, the money comes. So this is the main engine of the way everybody gets paid. The whole industry undergirds the whole industry. It's a huge deal. So there's already been some changes. And Dean, do you want to talk about some of the changes that have already been implemented as a result of some of the scrutiny?
Yeah, so what this does, the chapter will go through each one. NAR has made some updates and some changes. We've had large industry players like Remax and Redfin. You see that. You see MLSs. So you're getting a lot of organizations within our space who are making some pivots here. They're making some business decisions to get ready and to make some tweaks, looking at that horizon and seeing what potentially is coming over at them. So, and it outlines it, and it's just in an excellent fashion that you see some things, and this will help add some momentum, I think, in the reader's eyes about understanding the size of this or the potential challenge that this is, as you see and you follow this chapter as it takes you right down the path.
And as the chapter outlines, there's the potential implications, and we have to emphasize this is all potential. We're just exploring what's happening, and we factually are reporting like what is actually happening, and then the potential implications if the compensation is decoupled between the listing broker and the selling broker. So there's a couple of avenues if the degree that decouples. It's the FTC could take action, MLSs or NAR themselves could proactively or individually change the way it's set up now, or the lawsuits could have a ruling or a judgment. So there's multiple avenues. To our point, there's this multi-pronged, there's multiple elements here. And some of the potential impacts here, you all want to maybe highlight some of these?
Yeah, so this, that you can see them highlighted right there, and this is what we're specifically talking about. And that last slide, it could be a combination of more than one of those. It could not have to be just one, right? There could be a couple things that take place. So, the new buyer agency services compensation models that could come from this. The broker compensation, the idea that there was actually organizations that had some written trainings about their services being for free for buyers and things like that. So it's really taking a real view and look at everything that organizations are doing with working with the buyers, market-based buyer and listing broker compensation. So, with all this said, it lays it all out. And one of the things as a takeaway, and kind of not jump ahead, but for time reasons, is understand that you need to really, you being the brokerages, really need to hone in on that buyer presentation and the value the buyer brings to the buyer, and be able to have it look and feel like that listing presentation, right? So you've built out
and
resources and tools.
Coach the buyers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Right.
just think
And
just in general, Dean speaks to it. Like the agents just aren't comfortable speaking to their value as a buyer. I think I got my buyer broker certification back in 2007, right? But I think that,
Right.
That's like 20% of the agents out there, if even, they're just not comfortable. So this is the piece as leaders that you can really do, position your company to get ready for this.
And if you have any questions, here's the brokerage team. This is a highlight. Why don't you all kind of describe what offerings you have and what's available to people if they're interested in engaging with brokers.
Sure.
T3
so
brokers.
We offer a variety of different services. One of the things that we do is an annual business review, which is really where we look at the overall health of your organization, and we dive deep into your numbers. We provide some financial benchmarking. We look at everything from your financials to your marketing to your systems, your people, all of that, your agent retention. So that's a really great program that we offer. We also do C-level custom consulting, and this is for larger companies with multiple offices where we do a deep dive into your operations. So we can just do that annual business review. We can do a strategic intent exercise with you. And then if you have multiple offices, we can also work with your managers throughout, a bunch of different modules and helping them grow and improve their leadership. So that's a great program. And lastly, we have a year-long program called T3 Fellows that is a leadership development program. It's like a 12-month MBA in running a real estate brokerage. So I think the next slide has a QR code where you can scan to reach out to Dean or I, but we'd love to hear from you. And we're happy to have just a one-on-one consult with anybody that is interested in learning more and deciding if consulting's for you.
Great. Well, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Dean and Lisa. Appreciate this fast-paced run through some of the chapters that stood out for the brokerage audience. And now I want to welcome in Clint Skutkin, who will talk about some of the impacts and focuses that organized real estate leaders can take away. Welcome, Clint. Thanks for joining us, and excited to dive in with you because it's a very interesting time in MLS right now. Correct? Like, why? There's a lot happening. What's your overall, before we dive in, what's some of the reasons you think that there's a lot of energy here now?
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of the energy in a day-to-day capacity. And of course, sometimes you get so close to something that you maybe pick up on or think that there's more momentum than there actually is. So I've taken a lot of pause over the last several months to talk with folks that I trust and know and have been around and seen the different, velocities built around different movements. And I have to say, I think there's consensus that there is significant change coming in a 3 to 5 year horizon. And I know there's always been the lion coming over the hill in this space, but in this case, the lion may be picking up its pace as it approaches.
Yep, and we'll get into some of the details of exactly what that's looking like in a few slides. But first, we'll jump into some of the initial slides that we had talked about that real estate leaders and association leaders, MLS leaders could maybe take advantage of. One was the Analyzing the American Dream. This chapter basically looks at some of the studies and research that's out there about the impact of homeownership on communities, individuals, and families, and what does it actually mean to own a home. And Dean, what was Clint, what was some of the takeaways for you for this chapter, and like how it could apply to leaders in your space?
Well, it's one of the more powerful things of organized real estate that includes MLSs and associations is being a part of something that's much bigger than just your own business and what you do. And obviously the American dream is that the home ownership, the house itself. And that's really a cornerstone, I think, for many, or should be a cornerstone for many decision makers who operate as leaders in the association and MLS capacity. Just knowing, how solidifying, how powerful, how emotionally connecting that is when you're out engaging in advocacy practices, or when you're thinking through your MLS related activities, understanding that it's not just a transaction, it's where someone ends up walking through the door at the end of the day. Really love how this outlines, how that's historically developed.
And in talking about this with you previously, you made an interesting point. It's like, this is an opportunity for association MLS, and this is a chapter that can inspire some of that research and data that can in their local market can talk to some of the impact, and that can strengthen their agents' cases and spread education. And it's just a component that's an opportunity for education and advocacy even.
Yeah, very much so. And knowing again that you can tell your story that has an emotionally connecting way. I'm a sociology trained through sociology. So the socioeconomic impact of the house is really outlined well in this chapter. And as we're moving more and more into an age where housing related data and activities are coming to the forefront of decision making in the organized real estate space, this really highlights the fact that there's more information, more details here that can help economic development, retail decisions, all these different activities about wealth movement around the country. There's a socioeconomic aspect to the data that's contained within the MLS as well.
It's so valuable. And there's a lot of opportunities here. I think we're starting to see some of MLS start look at that, but we can talk about it in a few slides. Next up, we have Trend 6, which is investigating single-family home investors and what's happening there. And this is another one that's kind of an information and a data opportunity for MLS leaders and association leaders, right, Clint?
Yeah, I would say here, what we're seeing is, and we're understanding, if you look at some of the trends over time about home ownership against, rental capacities, if you're like me, you've lived in a college town, it's very different in terms of ownership versus rental versus where it might be elsewhere around the country. But you can see here that data of, renters versus homeowners, and going back to that last chapter, what it means, to be a homeowner versus a renter, and the temporariness or the way that you connect back into the community. But in a business sense and from a strategic standpoint for associations and MLSs, what we're starting to see is a better understanding and a need to document and have data and intelligence around the rental market that stands up next to the home ownership market. And we're seeing more continuums, a lot of momentum being built around rental-based products integrating and being incorporated into MLS structures, which is ultimately going to tell us a lot more about that journey through the home owning, buying, renting process, and maybe back out into it. And with the socioeconomic challenges that some of the generations who are coming into first-time homeowner standing that they have, this is really, really important for decision makers to think through who those clients are for the members and the subscribers that are coming to the table now.
Because as we point out in the chapter, that it's investors, the lower price points are where they're really targeting in a lot of these places, and also in some of these markets, the cities. One thing that the chapter makes clear is that geographically it's dispersed about the impact. Some places in Memphis, for example, I think it had the highest of like 20% of the single family housing units are rentals, that means by default investor owned, which is really fascinating. And so I agree. I think this is another opportunity, a data opportunity, education opportunity for realtor associations, local associations, and MLSs to leverage.
Yeah, it's certainly variable in the work that I do when I'm engaging with different communities. You go into different communities, and the concern, especially about institutional buyers, has become very, very clear in terms of its impact, affordability, various advocacy related efforts, and in other instances not really present there. But when you go into a community where there are entire communities that are being built with investor dollars that are intended to be in the rental stock for the entirety of its existence, that's when you really start to, I think, ingest and understand the importance and the impact it has for the industry.
Yeah, we profile the rent to build model, which is it's still small, but it's increasing. There's also the short-term rentals, which are the scale at which they're growing where they're growing portfolios of homes. Like the people that own, or investors that own short-term renters, they're having more of them. So it's definitely becoming. There's some new facets to the investor market. Okay, next up we have the one that you and I work really closely on and talked a lot about, and this one is it's about the MLS, and we've seen this title, as you pointed out. I think this has been 2 decades, 3 decades in the making. But talk a little bit about the overview of where we're at and how you approach the chapter.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core of this to me, and we'll speak to this in some of the slides later, is really for MLSs and their attachment to association-based decision-making and business structures over the years, really operated from just a general business practice of offer as much as you can for as low a price as possible. And that's shifting now to where you can have just general business practices. We're seeing now for the first time true competition, and it's escalating quickly in terms of MLS service delivery across naturally occurring marketplaces now, where multiple MLSs just have naturally created competition. On top of that, you've got others who are just saying, you know what, we're going to go out and actively expand. So you see here a lot of those regional entities who are dominant in terms of the number of subscribers served. While only 108 or 9 of these exist, they cover for the vast majority of subscribers the service areas that they are operating in.
Oh, I think as a chapter makes very clear, it's like there's 2 types of MLSs essentially, and these are how they're bucketed. And maybe talk a little bit about some of the key distinctions between each type, because they are very different, and they're approaching things in different ways and different opportunities and challenges in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the service areas, the broader, contextual aspect of them going across various marketplaces, but there are also, structural aspects, and it's highlighted in the chapter in terms of, some of the challenges that MLSs, have in some instances thrust upon themselves over the years by having, challenging structures, those types of things. What you see in a regional environment is you tend to have less of the association-based, decision by committee tendency than what you would have in a a local association, which is an association-run MLS that in large part covers one marketplace and has more of a committee-based structure. So there's some business aspects to this as well as service area aspects that kind of play into it. Important to note, though, because with the conversations I have around MLS and operational aspects, is there's a lot of this sense of without the MLS, the association would die. But right now, 60% of all associations across the U.S. are serviced by a regional MLS. So it's been shown that there are real association values outside of MLS, but you have to be very intentional about what that looks like.
And you and I have talked about that for a while, about the decoupling of a little bit of a value prop for each, and each focusing on what they do best, because there's a big opportunity, there's a big need for both as the education and advocacy, as you point out. So let's move to some of the vulnerabilities that we're seeing now, and like almost like why the time, to the earlier point of like, why is this now, some of this energy happening, and describe a little bit of the setup where MLSs find themselves and some of the challenges they have.
Well, I think really it goes back to what I had said earlier. For the first time, many of these entities who have operated largely in a monopolistic kind of approach are having to compete, having to differentiate, demonstrate value, make quick decisions. You know, last year in the trends report, we talked about this new stage of real estate with, you know, all of the technology and now the investment. You have these folks that have, you know, verticals that are aggressive in their nature and competing in different ways. And so all of these things kind of are in juxtaposition to this history of decision-making and business-minded approaches for associations and MLSs. And now they're having to flip on their heads very, very quickly into a decision-making mode. And as you can see, all of these pieces here, you know, these don't necessarily align with that. And then on the other side of that is the scale aspect. You have all this private equity investment that's occurred. You have technology entities that are you know, heavily vested. And, you know, scale, the largest MLS in the country are just over 110,000 subscribers, which may sound ginormous to a 3,000 member entity, but to a technical provider or a data oriented business, 110,000 as a TAM would be somewhat laughable, but it gets attached to real estate. So we think it's a big marketplace.
And as we talk about, and the revenues attached to that, you compare some of the revenues and and this is part of the challenge, and this is like the opportunity as well. It's like what we're seeing next is they have less revenue and profits and to invest in R&D, which brings us to some of what's happening now and collaborations. We're really seeing this pick up. It's happened over the last few years. Maybe talk about what's the genesis and you know what's happening here with the collaborations that MLSs are starting to do across the country.
Yeah, competition is there. There's a history of frustrations around expansion through consolidation because they're largely association-minded political conversations that are protracted and frustrating. So what you're seeing are the larger, more sophisticated and progressive MLSs saying, you know what, we've tried this expansion on our borders. It's not working. Even the largest two entities in the country, Bright MLS and the California Regional MLS at the beginning of 2022 said, look, we need to collaborate together because even our scale isn't big enough and we need to think about how we can be better together. And they announced that they weren't looking for any sort of consolidation activities. They were going to put forward a formal alliance and formulate those alliances around providing better data and better technology. And now they're actuating this. And you can see that, you know, it's not just the largest entities, but many others who, again, are larger entities that have tried expanding in, you know, their borders, and it just hasn't happened. So they're seeking out like-minded contemporaries around the country so that they can, you know, leverage, you know, not only just the financial aspects, but the intelligence and grow and learn together. And you're seeing that when you literally connect the dots, there is not a single MLS in this country that's not going to be touched by these collaboratives that are being formed and creating a web of collaboratives.
And that's what's really interesting. You can start seeing the future emerge. This map shows us very well. These are 5 or 6 of the collaborations we're talking about. Some of them are exclusive, some of them are not, and that MLSs can join multiple. But you can start seeing potentially a national, like covering regional, and they're not just a geography. To your point, they're like like-minded MLSs. Also, I think an interesting point here is we have heard a lot of talk in recent years about MLS consolidation, acquisitions, and merging. This is like the next evolution of that, of collaboration. So we're able to remain distinct, but also collaborate and get the benefit of scale and share technology and services. I think it's a very interesting. I mean, so some of the features of these collaborations, we list some of them here. Maybe dive into a few of them that are kind of happening at the basis of these collaborations.
Sure. Look, they're collaborating to compete. It's a compilation album, right? Like you put the best hits in one place and you know that ultimately you're going to go direct to broker in some instances and you're going to go compete for end users. And so when you go to the end users, why not have that compilation album versus just a single? And if you look at the smorgasbord of pieces that are being placed together here, it's the things that the end user values most. And that end user includes consumers. They're not afraid to engage direct with consumers, add value there while staying focused on the brokerage. And so that's really what we're seeing here is compilation. You know, you collaborate to compete.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, and it's the approaches differ slightly, but not. And some of them are overlap. Like the data sharing is very interesting, and the way they're data sharing is not always the same. But they're also sharing services, so they're centralizing some of like customer service and just really applying the economy of scale approach to MLSs, which is really interesting and powerful. And I think you can see even Bright is hiring a data scientist, and I think they have a chief economist. They just did this year, and Bright is the second largest MLS. So things are really happening here. You highlighted in the chapter, we highlighted in the chapter some of like the models that we see really thriving in this future, this collaborative kind of scaled up future of MLS. Maybe describe the features of each of these briefly.
Yeah. Again, moving away from general business practices into having a clear business competitive strategy moving forward. Some will be hyper local. Of course, we all think we're very important and very interesting. The reality is the marketplace knows what's important and interesting. And if you're one of those, then you can double down on hyper localism and just continue that high level of service and to leverage your uniqueness and your importance. Vast majority are not. Therefore, you've got to look beyond just your uniqueness and how can you build upon that uniqueness through collaborative efforts, as we've been alluding to. So the cooperation comes when you need to build and extend your business strategy beyond just your uniqueness locally into the idea of moving towards being competitive. And ultimately, when we start talking about hyper regional strategies, even national expansion strategies, the only way to compete is if you do truly have a uniqueness of value. And ultimately, what you've got to do as we move towards the next item that we want to finish up on is you've got to get outside of this headcount business model. You've got to find ways to diversify revenue. And you have a really important resource, as we talked about when we kicked this thing off, from a socioeconomic standpoint. Real estate housing data in an amalgamated sense in larger and larger data sets is really, really valuable, whether you're selling directly to GSEs, Fannie and Freddie, or ultimately longer term back out into big data revenue resources. It's a shift, though, in mentality around data utilization and what your fiduciary responsibility is as an MLS.
And in the speaking to chapter 1 that we touched on in the last segment, that the compensation was the anchor of cooperation here, and potentially with that potentially changing, there's all the more reason to diversify and focus on some of the data aspect of maybe shifting toward that being the anchor for cooperation through MLS and association. It's a very interesting time here. So there's a convergence of things happening here, and I think that the trench board lays it out pretty nicely in those chapters. So I know you have some offerings here for people to help get their heads around this and take advantage of some of these opportunities, like in the MLS and Realtor Association space. So why don't you talk about what you have?
And can I just wrap on that last item, Paul, before, because ultimately, coming back to the cooperation compensation, I think you're hearing and seeing leading voices around the country from the MLS space in particular saying, look, we've got to double down on cooperation. So what does that look like and how do we incentivize it? And what we're seeing is some of the monetization strategies around data are rewarding the broker participants directly for their participation, not just taking it, extracting it, and holding it. And so that's going to move us towards different approaches in terms of what does cooperation look like? How do you incentivize cooperation if it's not through compulsory compensation? So that's the thing I want to really encourage folks to. Yeah, organized real estate leaders need to be running scenario plans against the idea that there's a changed buyer commission or rep agent commission structure. You know, what kind of agreements are in place, those sorts of things. So if that's the case, you're going to need to apply the same type of energy to your higher level business strategies as you do to your day-to-day activities. And so that's largely going towards where we're at in our service levels. We certainly do, you know, parachute in strategic considerations, research, analysis, but what we're really moving towards is more engaged, ongoing programs. We're helping to facilitate some of these collaboratives. We're helping you to identify those long-term partners that are like-minded and can act and function just like you, and you can compilate in your own way with the folks that sing your tune and provide your kind of outputs that you like and you know that your end users are going to want. So we're moving from one-off strategic approaches to strategic programming, where we can keep you accountable, keep you plugged in, and even introduce you to like-minded partners through an ongoing program of intelligence, relationships, and strategic engagements. And of course, we'll be out around talking all about the various items in this chapter throughout the year. So reach out. We'll come happy to visit with your leadership or just visit your state national conference, whatever it is.
Yep. Thanks, Clint. I want to bring back in Jack Miller to introduce our next session. And we're jumping into technology. Jack, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you take it away.
That's great, Paul. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the handoff. You did a great job in the first couple segments there. So this is a topic that is near and dear to T360. We've done a lot on technology, and there's technology in almost every trend report that we have published. Where the Swanepoel Trends Report, being in its 18th year, has had usually 2 or 3 chapters every year that have gone into some technology topic. This year, we decided to invite our technology team to work on a chapter with us, and I want to bring on Travis Saxton, our EVP of Technology and an associate partner in T360, and Michael Phelan, our Vice President of Marketing and Brokerage Technology, on. So welcome, Travis and Michael, to our session today. Glad to have you here.
Glad to be
Thanks
here.
for having us here, Jack.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I love what went into this chapter, where we had an initial conversation, and part of it was like, what are the challenges that you're seeing our clients have with technology, and then how are we helping them? What are the ways that you can help them think about technology more productively? And I think the output of that conversation and the additional research and effort that went into that was really admirable. So let's hop in. So let's talk about we titled it "How to Seize the 2023 Brokerage Technology Dream." And Travis, I'm going to hand it over to you. Why don't you tell us about how we seized that dream, and what did we learn from all of the work that we've done with clients and distilled into this chapter?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, Jack, when we started working together, almost 7 years ago now, 6 years ago, we built the technology landscape, and we use that as the foundational language of which to communicate between technology companies and brokerages. And it's kind of like an operating system, like Microsoft Windows, and which program do you use? And we use that, but we realized that not all brokerages are created equal. And when Michael Phelan came on board, my esteemed colleague here, who has amazing experience in the brokerage, we really broke this down into a bit more of a continuum or spectrum of which brokerages can really start to decide who they are and what makes them unique. And this uniqueness is something that we really put a lot of focus on in the last year. But off of the heels of COVID, and probably the biggest party ever in real estate for the last couple of years, we're picking up the pieces now. And the next slide really talks about, it's kind of funny because many brokerages went out and they just started buying stuff left and right, not thinking about this bigger picture. And the average brokerage that we work with has 12.4 technology tools, and that's 12.4 tools that typically don't talk to each other. They need to support them. They need to integrate them. And the agent really only has the capacity to adopt about 3 or 4 of those. And so now we're left with years of buying, trying to keep up with the competition. And it's got us into a pickle in the industry So when Michael came on board, we built out these new continuums that said, who are you? What is your DNA? And we've been practicing this for several years, and it's really resonating well with the industry. So Michael, take us through
But
the technology profile and the continuums.
And Michael, I'll just say, some people don't know who you are. You had a part of what we were so excited when you joined our team. You had a background that just goes very, very thick with real estate and real estate technology. So tell people a little bit about yourself, and then let's jump into the profile.
Yeah, I first of all, thank you, Travis, and thank you for the opportunity. So, I joined T3 about 8 months ago after working in brokerage for 17 years, and my family and my wife's family are all involved in various aspects of real estate too. And the joke was I grew up saying that I would never work in real estate, and here I know I've been in for almost 20 years. But the thing that I think was really interesting is I worked as an agent, I worked as a loan officer, and then I led the marketing and technology for one of the leading RE firms for quite a few years. And it taught me a lot. And one of the reasons that I think I bring something unique to T3 is that in that time, I was really blessed with that, being able to participate in several different kind of CMO, CTO benchmarking groups. And there is no question that insight gave me just a really kind of big picture of like how marketing and technology was used throughout the industry, all different business models and stuff, which is where this portion of this chapter came out of, was all that experience and talking to friends and colleagues throughout the industry.
Yeah, so tell us about the tech profile. I mean, you've got a bunch of different criteria in here. Give us some of the thinking behind it, and how you approached it and how you think brokers can use it.
Yeah, I think that this was, no offense to you and Travis, this was the missing link. And what made me realize this was very early on with working with Travis. We literally got on a call, and we had a broker just raving about this technology vendor. And then we got on the very next call, like 45 minutes later, and all they did was blast the exact same technology vendor, how it was the worst thing ever made. And we stopped and we backed up after the call, and we're like, how can that be? It can't be the same, that different. And what I came to realize after we had a number of these calls was that it really is because all the brokerages are so different, right? And I think it's one of the things that makes the industry so hard to approach for technology vendors is that there's different business models, and even within the business models, broker owners, operators approach their agents differently. And, whether it's an agent-led brand or a strong company brand or how they approach lead generation. And I realized after doing some of these audits with Travis that was really what we were witnessing, was that each of these brokerages has a DNA, and they're all very different from one another. And so that when we are consulting with them and helping them think about their technology stack, for one case, it's not the matter of recommending a single best-in-class CRM, which is probably the question we're asked more often than anything, but it's really understanding what the brokerage is trying to accomplish and what their DNA is. And then sometimes it's one vendor and sometimes it's another, and that just works. And I think that's why there's so many really interesting opportunities in the industry too, with different technology vendors with different offerings. So that's what we came up. So we sat down, we came up with 10 ways that we thought brokerages are 10 strands. If you really want to think about that DNA piece again, 10 strands that really helped us to think about how to ask a broker who you are, like Travis was saying. And once they describe that to us and also give us a sense for what their strategic objectives are, one of the things I realized is that not often, but occasionally the marketing and technology leadership is not at the same table sometimes when some of those decisions are made. So they don't know what they're trying to accomplish. So what we really encourage is, broker owner operators, understand where you fall on these continuums, make sure your leadership, your marketing and technology leadership is sitting at the table with you, and then we'll help you pull the levers and push the buttons to accomplish those strategic objectives. So that's where this came from.
And in real world practice here, Jack, we noticed that we've got a lot of brokerages that are outside of their comfort zone buying technologies that don't fit their profile. And so we recently did a big project, couple thousand agent brokerage, that really started to get back to their full service, highly coordinated roots that they launched maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they've lost sight of that North Star. And so we helped them kind of refocus and realign with their goals and their core value proposition. And now that really helped within their adoption of their tools, and everything started to fall back into place. It's almost like your body gets out of whack if your knees out of place, and then your shoulder starts to hurt. Like that's what's happening in brokerage right now, and this really helps us diagnose that with the technology and marketing team.
That's very good. And I think we had this as a pull quote from the chapter. Aligning a firm's business model and technology profile can be one of the most powerful forms of technology optimization, which is what you're describing. It's like we run best when we have the right tools for our business model and the way that it works. But technology can be complicated, so it's been hard to always do that alignment. And I think in this chapter we've got a tool for that.
And there's two sides of the coin, right? This is an important message for the technology companies in this space too. We've got nearly 1,300 of them that we're tracking on the T3 Tech marketplace. And so there's a reason why, as the market shifts and brokers start to refocus and align on their core value propositions, that not all, you can't expect to walk into an office and just have them open the doors if you're a lead generation company. It may be mixing oil and water in some cases. So you have to get creative from the technology perspective of how you can enter into a brokerage. So we spend a lot of time on the other side of the table working with the tech vendors of how do you package, position, and price your technology so that you can get into the discovery of the brokerage. And so that's a big part of where we spend a lot of energy and time as well.
Yeah, because that's not a great experience on either side. If you've sold if you're a tech provider and you've sold into a company and then you realize like, oh, their business model or the way they work just isn't a good fit for our tech, and then it's disappointment on both sides, both ways.
And I think it's one of the reasons we see such poor adoption in the industry, right? Is that, broker owners, they go to a conference or they go to a benchmarking group and they hear about the latest tool that's working for somebody else. And they're like, oh, I got to have that, because they tend to be very competitive. They bring it in, right? And they try to launch it. And then they're disappointed when only 12% of their agents go, yeah, that doesn't really work for me. And I think that's what results in a lot of this dissatisfaction. And I think to the party slide that we started with, they did a lot of that during 2020 and 2021 because they had additional cash. And I think that led to a lot of fatigue, this fatigue that we hear about right now with agents, the ability, tech fatigue. It came as a result of just trying to grab every competitive advantage they could to some lackluster results.
Yeah. Well, talk to us, guys. I know in the chapter you outlined the process of something that you both do in consulting practice. Talk us through if you're a broker and you want to look at your business in a structured way, like this is your process. So tell the audience how that works.
Well, it's very important that we go through, like a good example is we get calls all the time or questions all the time about which website should I buy or which CRM should I buy. And we never really like to give out expertise or advice in a bubble like that, because it's very short-sighted, and we want to look at the big picture of what you have. And so the discovery process is a deep dive. It can take us anywhere from about 90 minutes on the low end to a full day, 8 hours, and sometimes even trickling longer than that if there's multiple needs of the organization. So discovery starts at figuring out who you are as a brokerage, what makes you unique, and really documenting those continuums and that brokerage profile that Michael spoke to. But then we go into now the 80 some categories of real estate technology. And the fun part about a discovery process is it's not just what do you have, and it's not just you guys talking to us the whole time. You get to learn about some of the best international trends from real estate technology. You get to learn about some of the best integration trends and data trends in real estate. And so it's a very collaborative process that you end up walking away going, wow, this is exciting, this is fun, and we re-energize that technology stack. At the same time, throughout the process, you get to look and see how you stack up and compare from a tech perspective and a scoring perspective throughout this process. So you get that peace of mind of, are we going in the right direction? So we go from discovery, then Michael and I spend a lot of time evaluating, our team does, I should say, and it's a full-on effort so that we can deliver an assessment to you that is tailored to your brokerage, unique to you, no strings attached, whether we work with a technology company in this space or not to help them, figure out their path forward. That is something that's very unique to us. We make sure that our assessments are very pointed and drive your decision-making forward. And then we help you with the action planning, the recommendations, sometimes even through to the negotiation, depending on if there's new contracts or contracts involved as well. So it's a very diagnostic view of your organization, but at the same time, you get specific recommendations for your company.
Yeah, I know one of the things on the assessment you guys do is also the assessment of how did the broker's effort to getting the technology in place factor into it? Is it a gap? Sometimes people blame the tech, but it's actually you didn't train anybody on it, or your rollout was an email that you sent to everybody one time. So there's some assessment. I think the assessment piece is really critical about determining, is it the tech? Is it us? Is it the two? What's going on here? So.
And I think that's where we can be helpful, Jack, because we'll know, because of our familiarity with the various vendors, we know who's kind of leading the way from the technology standpoint. And I always joke that if it was in a vacuum, this is what the score of that particular, whatever the technology is. But then we look at the implementation of that technology. So when we're doing these audits, we actually give 2 scores now. We do a scoring of the technology itself, if it were in a vacuum, if you were fully utilizing it at 100%, and then how your implementation is going. And that's where we really see the differences. That's where, we see the competitive advantages between brokers is they can have the exact same tech stack, but if one's out implementing and out executing the other, they're going to be miles ahead of the other one.
It's almost like 2 completely different results in that situation, because you've just got a better driver making the tech happen. So the technology just does what it does. It's about how the driver's driving the car. So, before we wrap up with you guys, tell us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing with clients, and just make sure people are aware of that, and then we'll move on to our next section. So what do you guys have on deck for this year in working with people? I know you have a new group you launched, which I'm excited to hear about.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. We'll start there. T3 Marquee is the future of CTO and CMO, technology and marketing leadership groups. They combine 2 different elements into this group. One major element is peer reviews, crowdsourcing, sharing of best practices and tactics and strategies amongst brokerages and non-competing markets. And so that's been done before. That's actually how Michael and I met, running a group for the past, I think, 10 or 12 years. And the industry needs this. They need these best minds to get together. And that's how some of the best strategies in the industry come out of those groups like that. But that's only one element. We set out to say, we don't just want to get people together and share ideas and stuff like that. We actually want to invest in the best leadership in the industry. So from a professional development perspective, how do you do tech audits? How do you do SEO audits? How do you do financial benchmarking? How do you do marketing audits? These are all things that we'll be teaching and perfecting in accountability groups, in peer groups through T3 Marquee. So this just launched about a month ago at our T3 Tech Summit, and now we are filling the groups as we speak. Going into February is when we're going to kick those off. And so our target is to have 2 full groups. We're already on pace for that. For February, and then we want to open up several more groups by the end of next year. It's a passion project of both Michael and I's. And that's not for everybody. That is for, we want the leaders, the most innovative folks in residential real estate in these groups, so that we can all grow together. Even the T3 team working alongside our peers in the industry and some of our best friends in the industry. So that's T3 Marquee. Obviously, we are ramping up brokerage technology audits. We're doing several of these a month, and we really want to help you guys make sense and enable intelligent change with what's going on in the market, with what's going on with technology trends, and really specifically what's going on with your firm as well. So the brokerage audits are a big piece of the future of T3, the T3 technology unit. And then lastly is the T3 Insider program, a budding, growing program that's got a lot of amazing clients in there. We share ideas. It's very programmatic because we got shouldered by 2 major events, the T3 Summit and the T3 Tech Summit. We help technology companies figure out who they are, how they grow, and how do they get to the next level, whatever level that is. And so obviously our team has grown. We've got Derek Taylor joined our team, Michael Phelan joined our team, Mike Feller. And so lots of amazing talent to help you make the right decisions, whether you're a technology company or a brokerage or franchise, even MLS and teams we spend a lot of time with as well.
That's fantastic. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you both for coming on and talking to us about the world of technology and how to seize the 2023 brokerage technology dream in the Swanepoel Trends Report. So thank you so much for joining. I'm going to bring Kelly White from our T3 Talent practice on board. So Kelly, are you with us? Let's see if we can. Yeah, yes. Great. Fantastic. Hello, Kelly. How are you?
I'm fabulous. Great to see you.
It is great to have you here. So I think you are next to last. You're not our closer, but you're close to it. We wanted to get an update from you. I know that you put together a chapter in the Trends Report that's really a distillation of best practices and what's happening in the talent market in real estate right now. So let's jump in and talk about that. Because I know you've been active out there working in the talent market. So let's hop in. So I've got it here. So tell us a little bit about you and the chapter. Like how did you come to put this together with us, and what can people learn from the chapter?
Yeah. So the reason we put this together is we were seeing some very specific trends. And so we wanted to be able to articulate that to not only our clients, but others in the industry. And so it's really the idea of what is the most in-demand position that's out there currently, and what is it that we need to do to be able to attract people into that, and how do you go about doing that in a constantly evolving market and staying ahead of the curve, if you will.
Well, tell me, I know the chapter has a list of the most in-demand roles. How do you know these are the most in-demand roles? Why did they make it into your list?
Yeah, great question. Very interestingly, these things can be very cyclical. So I've noticed, with the pandemic, there was a trend towards very high director of operations. Like we had a lot of people hiring for director of operations at that time. And I think it's because brokerages were so busy and they really needed help operationally and administratively. And then what we noticed was then a cycle of what we like to call branch managers. Some of these are very similar. So branch manager, agent recruiter, sales manager, growth officers. And the way that we know these are the most in demand is because people come to me and they want my help in making those placements. And so interestingly enough, I wanted to just bring forth that my latest and greatest count right now is sales managers and regional vice presidents, which all of those in some form or fashion are helping the branches or the regions grow. And so a branch manager is only, branch manager, sales manager, growth officers. Those are all about agent productivity, hiring agents, overall growing the organization, whereas an agent recruiter is much more refined about only doing agent recruiting. And then the other ones that just tend to be a trend are COOs and really CFOs. And so we know that because people are coming to us asking for those specific kinds of people.
Got it. And in the chapter you cover there's some changes in terms of how people are working now. Why don't we talk about those? I think one of them we have a slide on those, which is just the evolution of work. So talk to us about that. I think this was a trend that was already happening and has really expanded.
Yes, it's interesting because I think we're still in the middle of this transition. So a lot of brokerages, their people continue to go into offices during the pandemic. And so those people, when they go to find people and hire people, so there's a trend where those individuals are still used to going into offices. But it is more and more difficult in my role when there's an organization that wants someone to come into the office and the role itself doesn't necessarily need to be in the office. So you can see where a director of operations or a director of sales in a brokerage, they really do need to be in the office in order to be with the agents and with the leadership team. But sometimes what I'm noticing is the financial, let's say a chief financial officer or some of those, if you're able to work with someone in a remote capacity, then it broadens the talent pool of people that you can hire, and potentially you might get a more qualified candidate at a lower compensation range if you're able to find someone with in a remote position, depending on your market.
Yeah, it's a big change. Yeah, it's one that's happening. It's been happening for a while, but continues.
Yes, and there's a lot out there in the market right now about this continued trying to put people into the offices. But I will tell you that when I have a placement that's attached to a geographic location, it's much more difficult to find someone who wants to go and do that role than if it's a remote or a hybrid position. So I think the more that our audience can continue to think of ways where they might be able to make it remote or make it a hybrid situation or something like that, they're going to be able to open up the talent pool and people available to work.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good observation about today's market. So let's talk about best practices for now. You've collected. There's several of them in the chapter. Let's run through them real quick. How about our first one here?
Well, you know me, I like to hire fast and be agile no matter what it is. But this time, it's still really important that you hire fast and be agile. I just made an offer last week to someone, and he had 2 other offers on the table. My client was great. We got on the phone. He got his business partners to agree. We made an offer the next day, and we were able to actually lock that candidate into that position. So it's a fine line between completing your process and doing your due diligence and still being able to be quick enough such that if that candidate gets another offer that you're competitive. So being fast and agile and still following a process is an important thing to do. So I think that's the first one. And then the next one, Jack, is, let's see. Yes, this is a huge one. Exhibit your company brand and culture. One of the things, if you create a process, interviewing process, you can really exhibit your culture and your brand. And it's really important to know that literally from the first moment of contact with the candidate all the way through the onboarding process, you really are the living, breathing version of the brand and the culture. And so it's a really important component of the interviewing process that not everybody thinks of. And I think of it not only for when I'm working with clients that I'm representing them, but I'm also representing T360. And so you want to think about each of the key touch points in the interviewing and onboarding process so that the candidate can experience that. Well, I'll give a good example with this person last week. We got on a Zoom on Sunday. My client went through their entire value proposition in about an hour. And the demonstration of the brand and what the tools and tech that were available and that connection between the hiring manager and the candidate is really what sealed the deal. And so really living and breathing and thinking about your values and how you demonstrate them in the interview process is critically important. Your brand representation throughout the whole thing.
You're teaching them about how your company works just through that whole process and what the standards are. So that's great. That's really good. All right. Let's hit our next one here.
Okay. Retention and internal development. So, one of the things I will say is when we do the process we do, it's really a kickstart for retention and development. And what I mean is we really help our clients develop a very robust job description with key performance indicators and very targeted roles and responsibilities so that person, when they start, knows what are the key things that they need to do in order to actually move the needle for the organization and their role. And so when we do that up front and then the person starts and onboards and you train them to that job description and you're teaching them those key things that are going to change your organization, not only does it help your organization grow, but it's a retention for that person because they are then good at their job and they're getting positive feedback. And so it's really important these days. There's a tendency towards skill-based hiring. And so internal development really is important to people. They want to learn new skills. And so the more you can involve your employees in learning new things and being available to help them grow, the higher your retention rate is going to be. And I would say the similar thing with real estate agents too. The more you're connecting with them and helping them grow their business, their careers and whatever, they're going to stay with you longer.
Yeah. I think the last one we had, there's a lot more in the chapter. The last one we had was in our market situation today, how you're talking about planning. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in terms of your organizational planning, we get a lot of questions about this right now, which, by the way, feel free to reach out and we can talk about this for your organization. I like to say plan for the best case and the worst case scenario. And I also like to add in there short term and long term. And so while we often are looking at our P&Ls, we don't often have a standard practice for looking at our organizational chart and the roles and responsibilities within that. So for next year, what I'm saying is, look at what your best case scenario could be with transactions and volume and your growth, and then look at the worst case, and then have an organizational plan that takes care of both of those. And so that way you can easily move from one plan into another if things shift. I would also start to identify outsourced resources that you could use if you go down one path, right? So I'm already talking to a lot of people this week about how can they outsource transaction management? How can they outsource marketing? How can they outsource some of these roles and continue to be able to build and grow and do infrastructure sort of in a period of time, being ready for not only what's going to happen next year, but then potentially the increase over the next couple of years. So it's being able to manage now and the future. And so thinking about that as your organization is important.
Yeah. And I think we had a takeaway in our current market. So talk to us about that, about the market shift.
Yeah, so, right now is the time to take advantage of the market shift as it relates to staffing and organizational changes. I'm talking to many clients who they are continuing to look at where they want to be, not just next year, but in the next 5 years. And so they know that what they can do in this next year is hire certain staff that will make a difference over the next, 3 to 5 years. And so I think it's constantly just looking at your resources. And if there's anyone that isn't performing or performing marginally, now might be the time to top grade those and really just continue to plan and tweak and refine your organizational needs as it relates to staffing and hiring over the next year to 3 years.
Great. And just so our listeners know, the kinds of things that are available through T3 Talent, talk to us about those.
Yes. We constantly keep up to date the opportunities that are available, and you can see those at t360.com/opportunities. Also, we are in the process of launching our new blog, and so that's on t3talent.com. So t3talent.com is probably your best source of information. And then I'm Kelly at t360.com. So we would offer a 30-minute consultation on your organization or any of the elements of your hiring process if you would like to have a conversation with us. And we do have a full team of people that can also help you. So we've developed a team to support our needs and our clients at T3 Talent.
That's great. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for that quick overview of kind of hiring trends and what's happening in the talent industry. And we're just lucky to have you to have a window into that world that we were able to write about in this trends report. So with that, I'll bring back Paul Hagee for us to do a little conversation here at the end and talk about how the reader can use the report, what we took away from today's session. So Paul, what are your comments on today and your takeaways?
I think it's interesting. I'm happy to see. I think this was an intention to bring the report to life a little bit, because it's as we discussed at the top, it's a little bit of a dense one, and it's not always clear how leaders, brokerage leaders, and technology leaders, and association and MLS leaders actually can use it. And I was glad to see it's a 360-degree view of kind of what the report is and where people can actually use it, because like we've talked about this before, I think it's underutilized as a resource, because we have really done, and you and I, when we put this together and the team puts this together, we were thinking through strategically, very clearly, each of these topics and fine tuning it. So if you read the chapters, they will be a starting point for you to investigate each of these key important elements of your business strategically from a broader strategic angle than you usually do in a day-to-day operation or business. So I think it's And that, overall, that's what stood out for me. It was interesting to see it all together in one place.
Yeah, I think the report, this year's report, and I've read, I'm not going to say I've read all of them. I've read many of them because I joined the company in 2013 and I had been reading before then. But I've read many of them. And, my interpretation is this year's report had what felt like to me more actionable projects for brokers or for MLS executives or for organized real estate executives or volunteer leaders, where it's like, oh, this falls into work that I either am doing, need to do, want to do, need to get educated about in order to go do. So it had a lot of action in it. And then I also just wanted to say I think the housing stats, I know when we talk about it, sometimes statistics, people say, oh, it's a little dry. I actually found them fascinating. I thought the housing market statistics in the report, I thought how people that own their homes have 40 times the net worth of the average renter. And in the chapter we did, there was a deep dive on single family rentals and how 1 in 8 homes in the U.S. is actually a rental property for somebody, whether it's a big company or a mom and pop. So I thought there were some pieces throughout the report that kind of gave you a broader picture of the whole industry. And at the same time, had like, oh, there's action. Like there's something like in this bigger picture of our industry as it is right now. Here's actions and here's projects or objectives or things that I can go undertake to improve my business, kind of regardless of which market segment I live within or am an executive within.
And that's the real value and goal of is you come away with this pardon the pun, but a 360-degree view of the industry and where it's headed, and you can see all the tentacles kind of approaching, and it really gives you a broad view. And as I think was touched on the call, is this is one report, and these are the recent years. These threads are pulling, and we're watching these trends constantly. And so if you look at these reports stacked up a little bit, you can start seeing the shape of where the industry is coming, and we can all feel it, like the compensation stuff happening and the way that's presented. We can see where some of the stuff is headed. Same thing with the consolidation and peerage as an example, coming in 2019 and being a top 10 brokerage within 3 years. That's under the radar a little bit. I mean, I didn't know that until we actually did the chapter. I was like, wait a second, these guys
if they've acquired this many companies with this much sales volume, it's astonishing. And I think that, again, in our companion report that we do, the Real Estate Almanac that comes out progressively in the spring, that's where we also find that is wow, there's really a lot of movement happening within this industry that if you're kind of just doing your day-to-day, you don't necessarily get exposed to unless you pick up a report like this or like the Real Estate Almanac. So that's really great. So let's talk about, I think we had a slide on how to use it. We said, at the beginning, this is our recommendation: get copies for your leadership team, assign somebody to read a chapter, present on a chapter, bring it in and say, hey, I've read it. Here's how it applies to our business. Here's ways that we can, use this trend or take advantage of that trend. I think that's very strong. And then if you need help or support digesting what these trends mean, reaching out to our team, we'd be happy to talk to you about how to get further value. I think we should emphasize
that perspective part, is because this is very, and just so everybody that's been on the call and people have purchased a report, and next slide will show you where you can get it if you don't have it. But you'll get a digest of all the chapters. We created a special collection of slides that actually give you some meat to help as a starting point in your own strategic discussions, hopefully, that you can use and help spur conversation, because that's what this is all about. But I think that last point about perspective is we offer that as strategic presentations, and you can reach out to me at Paul at T360 and anybody on the call, really, and we can do a custom application of this and the guidance for you in a strategic presentation as a conversation with you that I think is very, very valuable. And I know you've done a few of them, and I think we're starting to do more and more of them, because it's very, very helpful when you have with a breadth of trends happening.
That's one where talk to us if you're presenting to your executive board or your leadership committee, or you have an organization. I just presented last week at Indiana Realtors, and they had a broker strategic advisory board, and we dug in really to the compensation chapter on the compensation lawsuits of the MLS chapter, and really talked about it for their whole state. And it was a substantial conversation, and it it brings some real grounding to that conversation into the room to say, we've got a significant publication with a lot of research that's very recent that backs up any decision making you have to do as an executive or as a board. So yeah, Paul, as you see, you put up how to get it, t3trends.com. That's where you can go get a copy. And I just want to say, shout out to our events team for putting this together. This is a different format for us. You guys did a great job. I see we've had people hang on a long time onto this call, so they're into the education. But hopefully, our new event technology here helped showcase this conversation a little better, a little higher, a little elevated the experience a little bit for that. So great job, events team. Which, by the way, they can do this for you. So if you looked at this and said, I'd like to run a virtual meeting like this, great. We have an events team that can do both live, in person, and hybrid, as well as these sorts of virtual events. So little plug for you guys over on the events side of our business. So Paul, I think we got there. I think we covered spike the football.
You think so?
And call it a day. So thank you for being my partner on this call and for leading the research and the writing report. I know it's a huge lift, and you did a fabulous job this year. And if for the listeners still on the call, if you haven't picked up a copy, please do. And if you have questions or follow up, reach out to any of our team members. We'd be happy to talk to you about your particular questions or queries on any of these chapters or topics. So everybody, if we don't see you, have a great holiday season. I know the real estate world's about to go into its deep slumber of holidays, and we just want to thank you for the time and attention you gave us right before taking the end of the year for some well-deserved time off with your friends and family. And I hope on behalf of T3 that you do take that time and really enjoy it. So thank you, Paul, and thank you to everybody here.